For those of you who are Harry Potter fans and may not be a fan of hearing criticisms about your favorite series, just warning you, there will be criticisms in this, so if you can't stand that, this is not the video for you. I love the Harry Potter books, but there are problems with it, and I will have to address those problems in this review. As I will talk about later, that doesn't always mean that it's going to be a bad book, because this is one of the best-selling books ever, and it has its problems to it. So with that being said, let's get into it. For those who are new, I'm going to give a summary, a history, and then I'll get into my thoughts. So let's jump in. What is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone about? Or the Sorcerer's Stone if you live in America, which it should just be the Philosopher's Stone. Even as an American, I agree with that. We follow this young boy named Harry Potter, whose parents died at the hands of Lord Voldemort, this dark wizard. And he figures out he's a wizard, and he gets the opportunity to go to this magical school called Hogwarts, where he meets his best friends, Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. And he also meets, the headmaster of Albus Dumbledore, the super powerful wizard who is really the only wizard that the Dark Lord Voldemort fears. There's other professors, of course, he meets. Chief among them, Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape. Professor Snape hates Harry and doing everything in his power to tear down Harry. Well, Professor McGonagall is the head of his house, because there are 4 houses: Slytherin, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw. Harry's in Gryffindor. Harry also has his arch enemy, Draco Malfoy, who's in Slytherin. Slytherin is mainly just the bad people. There's just all thrown in the same into one house, which I'll talk about later, because that's a problem unto itself. The story follows him as he's having these adventures at the school. He figures out that he's actually a pretty good wizard, and that he can fly really well, so he gets put on Quidditch, the Quidditch team, which is their version of sports. And he figures out that someone is trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone that's hidden in the castle of Hogwarts. So he tries his best to stop the person. Of course, I could go down every single moment. There's so much you could talk about, but the truth is, I want to keep that brief. I think most people know the story of Harry Potter. So that is a brief history. That's a brief summary of what happens in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The history of Harry Potter, I think this is one of the most interesting things. So Harry Potter was an idea that JK Rowling came up with when she was on a train. She loved trains growing up. She was sitting on a train and she suddenly came up with this idea of Harry Potter. And that's one of the reasons why the Hogwarts Express has such a big part in it, is because she was a big fan of trains. She came up with the idea on a train. So thus, this was in 1990 that she came up with that. By 1995, she had finished the first book and was off to publishing it. It actually took quite a while for anyone to pick it up, but finally one agent picked it up after his child had read it and fell in love with it. He said, okay, I'm going to pick this up. And even after that, it was still publishing. It took publishing a long time to finally pick it up. But eventually it did sell. On June 26th of 1997, the first book came out. And the next year, it came out in America. And it blew up. And by 2000, she had been picked up by Warner Brothers, who asked to make her books into movies. So she had not even finished the series by the time it had been started to be made into movies. Of course, there's plenty of other videos that break down into all this different stuff that happened. That's a brief summary of what led up to this. So with that being said, let's jump in to the big part of this video that I wanted to do, and that is my thoughts. Starting from the beginning, I honestly think the first chapter is not necessary. Probably would have been better without it, to be honest. That again, you can have different opinions of me, but it's just, I thought it would have been better if they had it so the first couple chapters, like having these stuff happen, and you two don't know what's going on until Hagrid shows up and says, "You're a wizard," and then everything starts clicking. All these moments starts clicking, but instead it starts with characters. Instead of starting with the main character, it starts with these other characters. That would have been so much better if they had just allowed it to start with Harry. I mean, it was interesting. I like seeing how the world was celebrating when Harry defeated Voldemort. I like that. But in the same way, if I wasn't one writing this book, or if I was the publisher, I would have looked at it and been like, okay, maybe I should find a way to make it so we don't introduce these characters until later. You see them from Harry's eye. Instead of you seeing them before that, and then you see them from Harry's eye again, and it's like, okay. And the problem is they also re-describe them again. It's like, okay, I don't know. I thought it would be better if they had just left that until later, so that when you meet Albus Dumbledore from Harry's side, you meet Albus Dumbledore for the first time, and you get to witness what he's like through Harry's eyes instead of meeting him before and then meeting him again. It's like, I don't know. But I did like somewhat the first half of the chapter, where it's like seeing his Uncle Vernon Dursley as he goes about one of his days, and you get the, like, I did like that. I did like how they introduced him in that way, and it was a good introduction. It was just, it kind of felt like, okay, like you're starting 10 years before the story even starts. Why? Like, I don't know, it just, I felt like it was pointless to have that there, and so it took away, in my opinion, from the story by having it. The next couple ones, I feel like I have to give a little bit of context before I go into them, because I think that's going to help a lot with this. And that is, I was raised in a pretty great family. It had its problems, and I'm not going to go too much into that. Maybe down the road, eventually in my life, I might talk more about that stuff openly, but for right now, I don't want, like, I love my family. I don't want to openly talk about too much of the criticisms I have. But in the same way, as someone who came from a family that was not perfect all the time, I don't know. It's just some of these things that I'm about to talk about with Harry, I'm like, I didn't come from that bad of a family as he was from. But in the same way, I would not have done some of the stuff he did. If he had enough brains, he would have known, keep your mouth shut. So, with that being said, let's jump into this. Starting with that, keep your mouth shut. There's multiple occasions in the second chapter where he makes comments back to his uncle, and I'm like, in reality, someone who was raised in a family where you are time and time again pushed down and said, your opinions don't matter at all, we don't care what you think, it's going to cause you to keep your mouth shut. I'm just saying, like, again, not someone who wasn't raised in that bad of a family, but had some of that. One of the reasons why I like running my film channel and then this book channel was it gave me an excuse to be like, no, I'm cutting that out. I am going to talk about what stuff I'm passionate about, despite the fact that my family and people around me said that they didn't care to hear that. Despite that, I want to talk about it. Thus, so, but I don't know, there was multiple times I'm like, I get it, he's like 10, but in the same way, even as a 10-year-old, people who was raised in a family like that, they would learn to keep their mouth shut. So, JK Rowling, she was raised in a family that was not perfect, and so, like, her family really didn't want her, and that's a whole, like, again, there are videos online about that you can go watch, and maybe eventually I'll make a video talk about her whole life and leading up to writing Harry Potter. But the point is, she was from a family that didn't really want her, and so I don't know, I felt like there probably should have been a little bit more of, yeah, someone like Harry who was raised in a family like that would learn to keep their mouth shut. You learn that no one cares about your opinion, thus you have to keep your mouth shut. You don't talk back, because if you talk back, guess what, you're going to get hurt. Same way, I don't get why Harry would talk back. It just seems like he would look, by this time, it's been 10 years, he would have learned, you talk, you don't get food. You talk, you have to learn to keep your mouth shut. That's how you survive in a family like that. The next problem, on that same note, is his birthday and all. It came to his birthday, they're in a cabin trying to hide from all these letters he's getting to Hogwarts. And they're trying to hide in this cabin, and it's his birthday now, and he's remembering it. That's another thing that's just like, someone who was raised in a family like that, where he never really had a birthday. He never had a true birthdays before. He can't remember turning 1 as a baby with his parents. He doesn't remember that. All his memories of his birthday is nothing. That's his memories of his birthday. He sees his cousin's birthdays and how that was treated. So yeah, he gets what a birthday should be like. He's never had a birthday, so it's like, when it comes to that point where he's like, oh, it's my birthday, like, I wish I could have something nice. It's like, by that point, if you're having that awful birthdays, you would forget about your birthdays. You would just forget. You would try to ignore that ever happened. I think that would have been better writing if they had it so in the first year, not a care in the world for his birthdays. And it wasn't until his friends, who now he knows he has friends, he has people who actually want to celebrate his birthday, that it suddenly comes back in his head is, hey, maybe my birthday can actually mean something. Like, maybe it is worth celebrating my birthday. I'm talking about this from experience. I have not had that terrible birthdays, to be honest. But ever since I was 13, I haven't had a birthday that I would say is that great. The closest thing I've had to a pretty great birthday was my 21st and my 22nd birthday. Because both of those birthdays, I was left alone. That's why they were great. It's because I was left alone. There was no one around me. That's what made them great. So, for the most part, I also choose to ignore my birthday for the most part. So, I'm just saying, like, I feel like someone in that situation would just choose to ignore that they have a birthday in the first place instead of dwelling on it. Yeah, he's turned 11. In his mind, as someone who's raised like that, his mind would be, who cares? It's another year. Yes, maybe you can make the argument that it's because he's now getting all these letters, and so suddenly this idea of someone is desperately wanting to contact him makes him think more about the idea of his birthday, maybe? I don't know. But I'm just saying, it just feels a little bit off for someone like that to actually care about that. On that same note, I think it would have been a good idea to have it so, because he mentions the feeling of like a nice hot shower, and I was thinking through that whole moment of like, if they really wanted to push the gun with how terrible the Dursleys are, I think they should have mentioned that he never had hot showers. Like, no, we need to preserve hot water. So thus, you don't get hot showers. You have to take cold showers. I think that would have been an epic, terrible thing to do. And I think it would have fit. That's more of like, I don't care too much the fact that it's like, oh yeah, he clearly did have hot showers and all. But I think there would have been an extra like pin in there. Like, yeah, no, he's also doesn't get to use hot water. Because that just sounds like something that the Dursleys would do, preserve energy, we are not allowing you to have hot showers. Anyways, moving on from the whole problem with his family and trauma and stuff like that, on to the Hogwarts Express. Next problem I have is the fact that when Harry gets his chocolate frog card, it mentions on it how Dumbledore helped Nicholas Flamel and make the Philosopher's Stone. No. It's like, okay, that's on a chocolate fraud card, but also it's too secret to be in any of the books that they have access to in the library, but it's on the chocolate fraud card. I'm like, huh? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like, what? What do you talk? Why is that on a chocolate fraud card, but can't be in a history of Hogwarts or something like that? I'm like, it felt like a little bit of like, nope, that doesn't work, but okay. But yeah, that's just a little nitpick more of like, okay, why did they... It felt a little bit like, okay, probably shouldn't have done that. That was kind of stupid. If you're trying to keep the Philosopher's Stone hidden, why would you do that? Next problem is that of... I honestly, and you're going to hear this a lot when I'm reviewing each of these books, a lot of people have mentioned this before, but Quidditch makes no sense. You have the normal scoring, like a normal sport, and then this extra sport going on the side with the snitch, and the snitch is really the sport that matters. So really, if you wanted to make Quidditch make sense, it would be more of all about the snitch, right? This, like, everyone is seekers, or like half are seekers, half are bludgers. Actually, bludgers in the first place is kind of like, why is that a part of a game like that? Like, members of a team that's the whole point is to try to knock other people off their brooms. Like that sounds like that's okay. That would be a foul if that happened, because then there is fouls that happen there because people knock people off their brooms or try to do stuff like that. But it's like, no, but if it's the bludgers that's doing it, then that's okay. Like, I don't know. It's just like this: either take out the snitch and then the rest of the game might make sense, or take out the goal or out like the keepers and the coiffeur and all that stuff, and just keep the snitch, and it will make sense. But it's like, the snitch is really all that matters, because whoever gets the snitch wins the game, practically. Why is the snitch there? Like, Quidditch just makes no sense to me. I'll also quickly mention the fact that I'm not a sports person, and so every chapter, and again, you're gonna hear me talk about this in almost every book, except maybe the last book, because the last book doesn't really have any Quidditch in it. Every single chapter there's Quidditch in any of the books. I'm like, can you move on? I don't care to hear about Quidditch. I've actually watched videos where people are reviewing these books or talking about these books, and they're saying the best moments, all the Quidditch. So again, that's me. And whenever it's like a scene with Quidditch, I'm like, okay, there are important things we need to get to. Move on. Just say a Quidditch game happened and let's move on. Like, I don't care to hear about Quidditch. The only Quidditch match that I ever kind of liked was his first Quidditch match, because it was the introduction to Quidditch, and you got to see that first victory he makes. And I said, well, we'll get to the second book, because there is one in the second book that I kind of like too. But for the most part, I just don't like Quidditch matches. I'm like, can you move on? There are more important things to do than watch Quidditch. I don't know. That's just me. There are people who love Quidditch. Next question I have more. This is one of the things that strangely I've never really heard anyone talk about, and I'm kind of confused. Really, there's no Potters alive? Like, I get it, like yes, I get it. Harry's parents are dead. Really, his grandparents are dead too? James was 21 when he died. How old is his parents? Like, why are they dead too? Does he not have any cousins? Like, what I've heard about the Potter family is that, they were pretty rich because of the fact that, they started this amazing hair brand company, which I'll get into the hair stuff later because that is a big thing for me. So they were pretty rich, and so really, he's the last living Potter. I don't know. I don't believe that. It seems kind of weird that he would, they have no relatives at all. Later on I think it's in the second book, they make a comment about how he wasn't allowed to see family. But that also doesn't explain, but now he's in the middle of the war. I'm just saying, I feel like there has to be more Potters alive. And the moment he's in Hogwarts, they would want to reach out to him, right? He doesn't have grandparents. He doesn't have anyone on the Potter side at all. No one has ever talked about this. They just, it makes sense why he has to live with the Dursleys and all, because of, the love crux and all. And that's later on in the series, and we'll talk about more about that. Never, ever see anyone on the other side because they don't exist. There's, the whole scene with him looking into the mirror of Erised, and he's seen his whole family. He doesn't just see his parents, unlike the movie. He sees his whole family. The whole scene, I was just wondering, why doesn't he have any family on that side? What? I don't know. It's just, maybe it's because I come from a big family. So I can't imagine this idea that a family would just die off after one couple dies. I would feel like, no, it continues going, but I don't know. Maybe he has some distant cousins. I don't know, but I feel like it would have been better if they had a character in the book where it's hey, I'm your cousin from your other side. Not like a second cousin, something like that. That would be cool. James most likely probably might have had cousins, right? Unless it's just one. Maybe it is just one child families all the way down, and it's just James's father only had one child, was an only child. His father was an only child. It just goes down all the lot. Maybe, but I don't know. I feel like he probably does have relatives out there, right? If I was writing Harry Potter, I would have had his grandparents on the other side still alive, and have it. So let's just ask you, a perfect place would be in the Goblet of Fire, right? He hears that he has grandparents on the other side, but he's never met them. And then during the Goblet of Fire, instead of having the Weasley show up, this elderly couple comes, and he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm blah 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 and blah blah blah. We're blah 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 and blah 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 Potter. We're your grandparents." And he gets to meet his grandparents. I think that would have been an epic moment. Or I feel like they probably should have introduced them sooner. But in the same way, it's I don't know. I feel like there should have been a place. There should have been Potter still alive. I feel like that would have been a better part of the story than just, there's found family in the story, but I feel like there would have also been a cool moment of him being able to reunite with his actual family and knowing that the Dursleys are not just it. Also, in the same point, why is his mom's, what happened to his mom's parents? Are they dead now too? I actually don't remember. I'm in the middle of reading The Deathly Hallows, so maybe it mentions that and I forgot about it, but I'm what happened to to her parents too? Are they also dead? I guess in that case, you could also, it's good that they're dead because then it would make it so then it would have an extra plot hole of why was he raised by the Dursleys instead of being raised by the Evans. No one is addressing this problem of the fact that he doesn't have any family on his other side. No one talks about it, and I'm kind of confused. Really? You're seriously saying that the Potters just died off? Maybe it's on Pottermore. Maybe it explains that, but I just would have preferred if they had it so he had family on the other side. He just never met them because the Dursleys did not want him to know anything about the wizard inside. So just imagine that. Imagine, along with him realizing that his parents didn't die in a car crash, crash, he also realized he actually has family, and they've been lying to him for years, saying that his whole family on that side is dead, or don't want him, or something like that. His family does want him. They want to get to know him, and having that chance of him meeting his own family. That would have been cool. And they didn't do that. The last negative one I'm going to quickly mention is the fact of why is it that they're like, oh, no one can go into the Forbidden Forest. And then immediately, for punishment, they send kids into the Forbidden Forest. Hogwarts logic also makes no sense, along with the fact that the houses make no sense. They literally have a house that's for the evil people. That's something I really think JK Rowling really needs to put out a second series, put out even just a single book that has a character that is a good, they have three characters from Slytherin who turned out to be okay people. Two of them were Death Eaters in the first place. But in the same way, it's for the most part, I feel like they should, Slytherin, as they're explained to have every negative quality. And that's it. Ambition is not a negative quality. Ambition is a good quality. This is coming from someone who I think I took one of the tests before. It either puts me in Ravenclaw, sometimes Gryffindor, but a lot of times it puts me into Slytherin. And so I'm as someone who's kind of a Slytherin, I just do justice to Slytherin. Slytherin doesn't have to be fully evil, but even if it is fully evil, why do they have a house that's for the evil people? That's kind of messed up. They realize, hey, these evil kids are all in the same house. Guess maybe we should find a way to flip this up a little bit. I get it. They were not the ones who created the houses. The houses were created back in the beginning. But in the same way, they should have picked up on the fact of, hey, if we put all the troubled kids all in the same house, it's going to cause them to get more trouble. If we try to separate them up, it might help a little bit. They probably should have thought about that. They found a way to separate them in some way to make it so they had friends outside of that one house. Because Severus Snape is a perfect example of someone who generally was in the beginning a good person, but he was forced to hang out with only people who were Death Eaters, and it turned him into a pretty bad person because of that. If he was put in Gryffindor, we would have had a completely different story probably. But it was because he was put in Slytherin that he became that bad. Even Draco. People have mentioned before that Draco might have actually turned out to be a little more okay if he was put in a different house. There's so many characters that, when you think about it, okay, you can't really blame them for being that evil because they were raised in a house that was glorifying evil, only hanging out with evil people. I don't know. I thought that was stupid. But anyways, on to some good things, because despite the fact that, I have a list on my phone here of each of the books, and I only wrote down the bad stuff because I don't even need to write down the good stuff because there's so many good stuff. But I do need to remember what the negative ones are. But the point is, with all that negative being said, there's a lot of positive. This book, as I said before, this is a best-selling book. This book inspired so much. This book is one of the highest grossing books ever. Because it is amazing. It is a fun book. I love this book. There's some very positive things with the book. I love it how they have it in this first book. Hermione starts out in. I read it again. I'm I hate Hermione in this first book. It's she's so annoying. And then the moment she joins and they become friends and then switches up, and you can feel it's totally from Harry's side of the story. Harry, the way he's feeling about Hermione, and then the moment he realizes who Hermione actually is, then it changes up and you get to see that human side to her. And it's I love that because there's this sense of, because you're seeing it from Harry's eyes for the most part, Harry's point of view on these characters changes as he realizes new things about them. In the last book, when you realize what actually Snape is his whole mindset towards Snape, the way he talks about Snape is in a very positive light after that because he realizes more about him. The way he thinks and looks at Sirius changes the moment, you're seeing it from his eyes. So I love that. There's, the whole world of Harry Potter is really well done, and it does a great job in the first book, setting up the world without going too far. You hear about the Ministry, you hear about these other things, but you don't get too far into it. I love all the foreshadowing, and as someone who's right now writing a book, and so I'm still working on the first book. After I finish the first draft, I'm going to be working on other books, but also even before I publish the first book of this series I'm working on, I'm probably gonna have the first draft done of my second book, most likely. We'll see. But I'm saying, like, from that standpoint, as someone who's now actually getting into writing for years, wanting to, finally actually doing it, I'm looking at, as I'm reading books, I'm looking at it from a writer's standpoint and being able to say, I can see where this might come in. Like I can see where they're coming from with this. And then, like, there are moments in this book and, like, throughout the whole series where I'm like, I'm seeing these hints. I'm like, I would not be surprised if I asked JK Rowling and I said, hey, this one moment, was that added into on the second draft when you were already starting on, like, thinking more about the second book and writing the second book? Because there are moments like there's a chance that she might have had Hagrid get expelled, mentioned Hagrid got expelled in the first draft, but there's a chance it might have been she was writing the second draft already, she was writing the second book already, had her first draft going, and she then, like, she was making the second draft of the Philosopher's Stone, and she's like, let me just throw in right there, he got expelled. I don't know, but I'm saying, like, there are moments in this whole series where I'm reading it, and I'm like, there's a moment in the Order of Phoenix, and I'll talk about that in my Order of the Phoenix video more, but where Petunia, Harry's aunt, mentions something about that boy that her sister used to hang out with. And you assume that she's talking about James. But as someone who read the whole series through and you're reading it through it again, you pick up on most likely who she's actually talking about is Severus Snape. Spoiler alert, Lily's best friend. As a little kid, her best friend was Severus. And so there's, like, little moments like that where you're like, okay, most likely with the Prince's Tale, that was something that she had planned all the way from the beginning, so she already knew about that. But that's an example I thought of like, okay, yeah, there might have been a chance she was already starting to work on stuff with the first draft of the Deathly Hallows when she threw that line in. I can't be 100% sure. There are some stuff that I already know my whole story of what's going on in the whole series of my books that I'm writing, so I throw in little moments here, moments there that it's not going to get paid off until the very end of the last book or something. But in the same way, there are plenty of moments probably that when I'm working on a second draft of that book that I'm like, hey, I hadn't, like, maybe I changed the name of one of the countries that's mentioned, and then as I'm going through the second draft, I'm like, oops, I need to change that and change the name. I only came up with that when I was writing the second book, so I'm like, like, different stuff like that can change, and I think that's really cool. Those little moments that's hinting toward the second book or the third book or something like that. In the first book, when Hagrid mentions that it's Sirius's bike, you don't meet Sirius until into the third book. That's a throwaway line, and no people reading the book when it first came out wouldn't have picked up on who Sirius is until later on, and then it's like some of the people might have, as they're reading the third book, like, hold on, didn't they mention Sirius's bike earlier? Like, until, like, yeah, no, yep, they were, but, like, there are little moments like that I really like in these books where it's like, yeah, she clearly had a plan, and that's how I would have said it back then. It's like, she clearly had a plan from the very beginning. All these ties in had to do with that. But then as someone who's writing a book now, I'm realizing more and more there is that. But there also is the fact that books are written multiple times. I think a lot of readers don't realize how long and how much work goes into a book and how many drafts go in. If I remember correctly, the first chapter of this book had over 100 different drafts before she finally came up on one. Like, a couple of them apparently spoiled too much of the series in the first chapter. I think a lot of people don't realize, and that's something I'm definitely going to talk about in this channel more, is, as I'm writing my book and as I'm learning more about that from a writer's standpoint, how much work goes into just, like, behind the scenes of books that people don't realize. And so I can appreciate books more and more as someone who's writing a book because of that. Another really positive thing I love about this, and I said I was going to mention it, is the hair. I love the fact that Harry has really messed up hair. Watching the movies, I was like, oh, cool, he has... Like, I didn't really care too much about his hair because his hair was, straight and down and all. And then when I read the books for the first time, and then I heard him mention how the back of his hair would never stay down, and I almost jumped for joy because that was the first time I ever heard in a book someone describe my hair. And I'm like, what? he has the same hair as me. You can't tell now because I grew my hair out long, so it wouldn't do that. And it's slicked back right now. But that was something I'm like, wow, because that's a problem I run into is that the back of my head, the hair, if it's not buzzed really short or super long, it's going to stick up in the end. And there's really nothing. I can put a bunch of gel in my hair and it can keep it down somewhat. But for the most part, it sticks up in the back. And so hearing that Harry Potter had that, I'm like, that's epic. There's there's a character who has my hair, and that's all good to know. So I'm like, yeah, I really like that part of the series, of the book, was the fact when I realized that. I'm like, oh, great, I'm not alone. So overall, I would say with this book, it's not my favorite in the series. It's definitely good. Again, as I mentioned in a video before this on movies I'd watched before reading the books, Harry Potter's on that list. I watched the movies. I thought the movie was okay for the first one. I'll talk as I go through the books. I'll talk about them. These reviews, I don't want to go into too many of the differences between the books and movies. Maybe I'll put out videos later about that. But as someone who watched the movies first, reading the books for the first time, I was like, I don't know. I kind of like the movies more. Reading these books again, I'm like, no, I definitely like the books more. Maybe it's also coming from the standpoint of someone who's writing a book right now. I have more appreciation towards books. I also just always had appreciation towards books. I think as I get older and I'm running this channel now, I'm more and more realizing how beautiful books are. The movies can never stand to. There's just some imagination that you can never get from a movie. You see something. When you're reading a book, you get to imagine what it looks like in your own mind. And you, like, just something you don't get in, like, movies. It's just, yeah, there's some stuff that's going behind the scenes that you can imagine. But for the most part, you don't, like, everyone has a different picture in their mind of what it might look like. If it's explained well, you know, everyone has a similar picture. This tree might be here, this tree might be... Everyone can have their own different version of what the castle looks like, where each window is, all this different stuff, how many towers, because it never explains the amount of towers, all this, like, there's so much you can have for your own imagination when you're reading a book that you can't have in movies, you know. So, yeah, that's just maybe that's one of the reasons why. Maybe it's also the reason that there's that TV show coming out now. So now reading these books from the standpoint of, hey, there is a chance it might change. I mean, the movies are well done. And so because of that, it's just in the same way of I can read The Lord of the Rings, but the Lord of the Rings movies are so good that, don't get me wrong, the movies of The Lord of the Rings are nowhere close to The Lord of the Rings books. I'm sorry. I'm a Tolkien nerd. There's nothing that can stand up to that. But in the same way, I watch those movies from a place of knowing that those are set in stone. Those are good. I like watching those movies. I don't want anything to change. In the same way, that's where I went with with the movies of Harry Potter. It's like, yeah, there might have been some changes, but in the end, it's good. These movies were done, and but now that we're getting a TV show, I'm now being able to be more critical of the movies and be able to be like, yeah, the books are better, instead of just having to dwell on the fact that, you know, the movies are okay. Movies are good too. I can be like, no, the books are better. No. So maybe that's some of it. Like, there's multiple reasons, but yeah, reading the books again, I'm realizing I do like the books more than the movies. Though, reading these books makes me want to watch the movies again, so I'm probably going to have to do that. Yeah, I love this book. It's not my favorite in the series. I'll probably give it a 7 out of 10. And you're going to see as I'm going through the series at my thoughts as they change throughout it. You know, a lot of the first books, there's going to be a lot of complaints about the beginning of the book and stuff like that. By the end, my complaints are going to be a lot different because the series grows over time. And so for that reason, I can't fully put it too high up on the list because of it's okay, but it has its problems. It's the beginning of a series that grew over time and became really big. But the first book in itself, it's magical. It's a fun read for kids, but it's not the greatest. For that reason, I want to rank it a little bit lower because of all its problems. But yeah, overall, I think it's a great start to the series. And I can't wait to review The Chamber of Secrets, which was my favorite movie when I watched them. And we'll see how the book lines up. Of course, I've read all these books before, so I already know where it lines up, and I've actually already read the book before recording this video, so I already know my thoughts on it, but you have to wait and see for those. So if you want to see that video when it comes out, consider subscribing. Thank you guys for watching. Peter Wary, signing off.